So we sent information out to you before these meetings or this presentation session today, and they were reflections of what we believe we have, or the point we believe we've got to as a group, so with the coastal panels, and that is through the assessment of the different policy units and the adaptation options that are most appropriate for those policy units, and then what potentially the preferred pathway is in terms of the action you might take over time, the community might take over time to manage that risk. So what I wanted to do today is just reflect that back to you, but also to explain how these tables work and what we're showing. The idea being that once you have a better understanding of this, we've got some homework that we're going to set that allows you to basically give us feedback. Do you agree? What are we missing? What have we got wrong? What have we got right? That we can then talk about in more detail next time around when we do meet in person. And also next time around, we need to talk about thresholds. So if we've agreed a pathway, what we then need to do is determine, well, what's the trigger and what's the threshold that would cause us to change course. So starting at the top, this is the first policy unit within your coastal panel area. And just one thing for a moment, I can't see hands going up. I'm not as advanced as Nick in this when I'm talking. So I'm quite happy for you to ask questions as we go along. I just need someone like Amon to tell me when there's a hand up so that I know that there's a question being asked. So,
okay, I'll interrupt if needed.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. So first of all, adaptation options. These are the options that we have shortlisted. So you remember last time around we had two times ago we had our folium and we had all the options that potentially could apply in this panel, in this policy unit area. And then we did our assessment of that. What were the environmental consequences? Was it technically feasible to apply that type of option in this location? Would there be adverse implications? Other information such as what are our values? Did that align with our values? And that meant we came up with our shortlist here. So these are the things that the group felt we could be applied in this location. And so for this Ocean Beach South, so you can see it in the picture here, there were quite a lot of options that are viable, that are acceptable, for want of a better word. And so then it's a matter of, well, what's the preferred pathway? And then there is this, so you have this sort of notional short-term, medium-term and long-term. But just to note that there are no fixed time frames associated with those. So short-term, we're not, or medium-term is a better example, that's not 50 years hence. It might be 30, it might be 40. It depends on when we reach that pathway shift point, that point where we need to change. It's just sort of, mentally, we can think of it as this is something that we're soon to face. That is something that in our lifetimes we'll face in the next few decades, and long term is something that we might not face, but our children will, our grandchildren will, those sorts of things. There's also this little period before the short term, which is effectively now. What should we be doing now, if anything? And then you have this, well, what's next? That beyond that we can't really predict, but that's just indicative of the trajectory that we're on. So you can see these tables. You have the risk assessment for each policy unit. You also have your key down here that shows you your preferred pathway. And then the colour of the line indicates the, I can't think of what's the right word, the category that the option falls within. So do nothing is a part of no active intervention. Maintain natural defences as part of accommodate the sea level rise. Which is brown. This yellow one or orange one is hold the line. So they're more active interventions. And green is managed retreat. So, which includes more than just retreating. It's relocating assets, it's changing planning practices, it's those sorts of things. And so what you've got here is do nothing. That literally means do nothing, rather than, for example, maintaining your natural defences. As soon as you're maintaining your natural defences, you're taking an action. It's a positive response. So that's why we're saying here that they don't coexist, which is just a subtlety. But if you're doing something, you're not doing nothing anymore. And then there's these footnotes. I'm sure you've all worked it out, but that just helps provide more information on what we mean in this context and for this policy unit. So maintain natural defences, in this case, rehabilitate natural species, manage access. I'll also come on to this because in the next slide, I think some cases these footnotes indicate which part of a policy unit and action it applies to. Now I'm going to actually cough and so I'm going to turn my mic away and have a drink of water. Oh, sorry about that. And the one I haven't talked about here is this, but it's implicit in what I've said. So this is the point. The threshold occurs when the hazard exposure is such, so the risk is such, that pathway shift is required. So you need to take another course of action. Maintaining natural defences isn't going to be enough anymore. Because either you're putting people at risk or you can't maintain your lifestyle or your values and so on. So just another example, Graham's Creek here. So we're basically saying, again, in the short term, avoid development in those locations where there isn't development now, change planning practices, because it looks like we're going to have to make a change here in the midterm. And what you've got here are different alternatives. You could improve your existing defences, you could build new stock banks, or you can actually change planning practices and relocate. So what we're showing here with our preferred pathway is the preference that we're indicating. So for this location, we're suggesting that building a new stock bank isn't the preference, that there is probably a validity in improving what you've got because there are defences there at the moment already. But that is where there are defences, and those locations there aren't, then you would need to relocate and you need to change your planning practices to allow that. And the other thing to remember is these long-term consequences, medium-term consequences, if we're optimistic, they may not eventuate. We might not reach this point. So in this case, it might be enough to avoid and improve our existing defences if sea level rise and increased storminess and those things doesn't get as bad as it could do or it's predicted that it could do. Unfortunately, the more recent information that's come out from the IPPC, etc., is showing we're not on that trajectory, unfortunately.
Just make a point there that what we've got so far is what we're going to use for further consultation with the wider community and refinement. So it's not, this isn't the final recommendations by any means. This is what we've captured so far. We need more input from you guys, wider consultation with people that are affected, and then there'll be further refinements before they go through the governance kind of structure for approval. So if you see something that's you're not quite comfortable with, don't be alarmed thinking that this is the final position on what we're going to recommend necessarily.
That's a very good point, actually. Good point, Amon. Yeah, these are draft. These are very draft. This is where we've got to so far. This is not the end point.